The crystal chandeliers of the prestigious Hamilton Country Club in Beverly Hills sparkled like frozen tears as Isabella Martinez made her way through the crowd of New England's elite. At 22, she stood out among the sea of designer dresses with her simple cream-colored gown, a masterpiece she had sewn herself, dreaming of this very moment. Her trembling hands clutched an envelope containing the business proposal that could change everything for her family's struggling bakery. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Richard Sterling III, the silver-haired patriarch of Sterling Enterprises, "welcome to our annual charity gala." His voice boomed across the grand ballroom, commanding attention just as it had for the past 30 years of his reign over the business world. Isabella's heart raced as she caught sight of his son, Alexander Sterling, the young heir to the Sterling Empire. Their eyes met across the room, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to remember their secret meetings in Central Park, the stolen kisses, and his promises of forever. He had been her first love, her beacon of hope in a world that had always looked down on the daughter of immigrant bakers. But tonight was about business, not romance. Her family's beloved bakery, Sweet Dreams, faced foreclosure after a series of misfortunes. This proposal, combining traditional recipes with modern business strategies, was their last chance. Well, if it isn't the little baker girl," came a silky voice dripping with contempt. Victoria Blackwood, Alexander's fiancée and daughter of Senator Blackwood, stepped into view. Her blood-red designer dress probably cost more than Isabella's family made in a month. "Did you get lost on your way to the kitchen?" Isabella lifted her chin, channeling her mother's strength. "I'm here to present a business proposal to Mr. Sterling." Victoria's perfectly painted lips curved into a cruel smile. "Oh, darling, did you really think you could walk in here with your homemade dress and your little dreams?" She raised her voice deliberately, drawing attention from nearby guests. "Alexander, sweetheart, come here. Look who decided to crash our party." Alexander approached, his face a mask of practiced indifference. Gone was the warmth that had once made Isabella believe in fairy tales. "Isabella," he said coolly, "you shouldn't be here." "But, you said." Isabella's voice faltered as realization dawned. The late-night conversations, the promises of help, the tender moments, they had all been a game to him. Victoria laughed, the sound echoing like breaking glass. "Did you actually believe he cared about you?" "Oh, this is precious." Alexander was just doing his civic duty, helping the less fortunate feel important for a while. The room began to spin as more of New England's elite gathered around, their whispers and snickers cutting like knives. Isabella watched in horror as Victoria snatched the envelope from her hands and began reading aloud, her voice mockingly sweet. "Sweet Dreams, a fusion of tradition and innovation? How quaint. Listen to this, everyone. She wants to revolutionize the bakery industry while preserving cultural heritage. Playing businesswoman must be such fun." Tears burned behind Isabella's eyes as the crowd's laughter grew louder. But it was Alexander's silence that hurt the most. He stood there, champagne in hand, watching with detached amusement as his fiancée humiliated the woman he had once claimed to love. Richard Sterling finally approached, his presence parting the crowd like Moses at the Red Sea. "Miss Martinez," he said, his voice carrying centuries of old money authority, "this is a private event. I believe it's time for you to leave." As security guards appeared at her sides, Isabella caught one last glimpse of Alexander. For a split second, something like regret flickered across his face, but it vanished as Victoria wrapped her arms possessively around him. Outside, the cool autumn air hit her tear-stained face. The proposal's pages, torn and scattered by Victoria, danced around her feet like fallen leaves. But as Isabella Martinez stood there, something shifted inside her. The pain crystallized into determination, the humiliation into fury. One day, she whispered to the indifferent night sky, "They'll remember this moment. Not as the night they broke me, but as the night they created their worst nightmare." Back home, in the small apartment above Sweet Dreams Bakery, Isabella found her mother waiting up. Maria Martinez took one look at her daughter's face and opened her arms without a word. As Isabella collapsed into her mother's embrace, the scent of cinnamon and vanilla wrapping around her like a protective shield, Maria whispered, "Mi amor, sometimes God closes a door so we can find the strength to break down a wall." That night, as the city slept, Isabella sat at their worn kitchen table, surrounded by recipe books and business journals. Her grandmother's old rosary beads wrapped around her wrist, and her father's weathered calculator sat before her. She began to write, not a proposal this time, but a plan. The girl they had mocked might have entered that ballroom, but it would be a woman who would rise from the ashes of this night. And when she was done, the entire Sterling Empire would learn that they had gravely underestimated the power of a dream born from necessity and nurtured by revenge. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a story that would shake the foundations of their privileged world. 3 years had transformed Isabella Martinez into someone her younger self wouldn't recognize. Gone were the homemade dresses and naive dreams. In their place stood a woman forged in the fires of humiliation and determination. Her once wild dark curls were now elegantly styled, and her simple clothes had been replaced by carefully chosen designer pieces, armor for the battlefield of high society. The day Sweet Dreams Bakery closed its doors had been the darkest of her life. Her father, Miguel Martinez, had suffered a heart attack upon hearing the news of their foreclosure. As he lay in the hospital, Isabella had made a vow that would change everything. She would not just survive, she would conquer. Miss Martinez, her assistant Sarah knocked on the door of her corner office in downtown Manhattan. "Mr. Chun from Golden Dragon Investments is here to see you." Isabella smiled, adjusting the jade pendant at her neck, a gift from her first major client after she'd revolutionized their family business. "Send him in." The past 3 years had been a masterclass in reinvention. After the humiliation at the Hamilton Country Club, Isabella had sold everything she owned and used the money to enroll in intensive business courses. During the day, she worked 3 jobs. At night, she studied until her eyes burned. Her mother's recipes became the foundation of a new vision, Dulce Revolution, a luxury dessert brand that combined traditional Latin American flavors with high-end presentation. Mr. Chen entered, his usually stoic face brightened with excitement. "Miss Martinez, the numbers from the Asian market exceeded all projections. Your concept of gourmet Latin Asian fusion desserts has created a frenzy in Singapore and Hong Kong." Isabella nodded, maintaining her composure despite the triumph singing in her veins. Dulce Revolution had grown from a small specialty shop in Brooklyn to an international sensation in just 18 months. Each success was a step closer to her ultimate goal. "Excellent news, Mr. Chen. Now, about the Sterling Enterprises acquisition target list." He handed her a thick folder. "As you suspected, they're planning to acquire several regional bakery chains. They're calling it Project Sweet Victory." He hesitated. "There's something else. Alexander Sterling is heading the initiative personally." Isabella's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palm under the desk, but her face remained impassive. "How fitting," she murmured. "Tell me, has news of our Asian success reached the American market yet?" "No, we've kept it quiet as requested. Most still think Dulce Revolution is just another boutique brand." "Perfect." Isabella rose, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. "It's time for Phase 2. Contact our friends at Peterson & Associates. Tell them I'm ready to move forward with the takeover." After Mr. Chen left, Isabella allowed herself a moment of reflection. The jade pendant caught the afternoon light, reminding her of her father's words from his hospital bed, "Ni pequeña guerrera, sometimes God gives us pain to teach us our true strength." Her phone buzzed, a news alert about the upcoming Sterling Enterprises Charity Gala, celebrating their 75th anniversary. The same event where they had humiliated her 3 years ago. Her lips curved into a smile as she read the guest list. All of New York's elite would be there, including Victoria and Alexander Sterling, now married for 2 years. "Isabella?" Her mother's voice came from the doorway. Maria Martinez, elegant in her designer suit, had transformed alongside her daughter. As Dulce Revolution's head of product development, she had turned their family recipes into gold. "Are you sure about this, mi amor? Revenge, it can consume you." Isabella turned to her mother, her eyes soft but determined. "This isn't just about revenge, Mama. It's about justice. For Papa, for us, for every dreamer they've crushed under their expensive shoes." Later that evening, as Isabella worked late in her office, Sarah rushed in with breaking news. "Miss Martinez, Sterling Enterprises just announced their acquisition of Heritage Bakeries. They're moving faster than we anticipated." Isabella's smile was razor-sharp as she opened her laptop. "No, Sarah. They're moving exactly as planned." She pulled up an email and began typing, "Dear members of the board, as the CEO of Dulce Revolution, I formally request a meeting to discuss a mutual opportunity." The pieces were falling into place. What the Sterlings didn't know was that Isabella had spent the last year quietly buying shares in Heritage Bakeries through various shell companies. Their hasty acquisition was about to become their biggest mistake. As she worked into the night, her office overlooking the glittering city, Isabella remembered Victoria's mocking laughter, Alexander's cold indifference, and Richard Sterling's dismissive command to leave. Soon, they would learn that they had created something far more dangerous than an enemy. They had created an empire builder. The next morning, New York's business world was rocked by an unexpected announcement. Dulce Revolution had acquired a controlling interest in Peterson and Associates, one of the city's most prestigious investment firms. The same firm that had handled Sterling Enterprises acquisitions for decades. Isabella's phone rang, Alexander Sterling's name flashing on the screen. After 3 years of silence, he was finally reaching out. She let it ring, savoring the moment. On her desk lay an invitation to the Sterling Enterprises Charity Gala, the gold embossing catching the morning light. "Sarah," she called to her assistant, "contact Tom Ford's office. I need something special for the gala. Something unforgettable." As she stood in her office, looking down at the city she was slowly conquering, Isabella touched the jade pendant once more. The naive girl who had walked into that ballroom 3 years ago had died that night, but from her ashes had risen something far more formidable, a woman with nothing to lose and everything to gain. The Sterling Empire had no idea what was coming. Their world of old money and rigid hierarchies was about to be shaken to its core by the very woman they had once mocked. And Isabella Martinez was just getting started. In her private bathroom, she touched up her red lipstick, the same shade as Victoria's dress from that fateful night. The symmetry was not lost on her. Soon, very soon, she would walk back into the Hamilton Country Club, not as a dreamer with a proposal, but as a force of nature they never saw coming. Time to remind them, she whispered to her reflection, that some storms come dressed in silk and stilettos. The Hamilton Country Club hadn't changed in 3 years. The same crystal chandeliers cast their ethereal glow over the gathered elite, the same champagne flowed in delicate glasses, and the same air of entitled superiority perfumed the air. But Isabella Martinez was no longer the same woman who had fled this place in tears. She paused at the entrance, a vision in a Tom Ford creation that made Victoria's old red dress look like bargain bin fashion. The midnight blue silk cascaded down her curves like liquid starlight, while strategic cutouts hinted at the steel beneath her elegant exterior. Around her neck, the jade pendant served as a reminder of how far she'd come. "Miss Martinez," Richard Sterling's voice carried the first hint of uncertainty she'd ever heard in it. "What an unexpected pleasure." Isabella's smile was honeyed poison. "Mr. Sterling, surely you received notice that Peterson and Associates' new CEO would be attending?" She watched realization dawn in his eyes. "Oh, that's right, you didn't know. The announcement goes public tomorrow." Before he could respond, Victoria's voice cut through the crowd like a badly tuned violin. "Isabella? My God, who let the help back in?" She approached, Alexander trailing behind her like an expensive accessory. "Although I must say, at least you've learned how to dress properly." "Goodwill's designer section?" "Tom Ford, actually," Isabella replied smoothly. "But I'm not here to discuss fashion, Victoria. I'm here to discuss business. Specifically, Project Sweet Victory." The color drained from Alexander's face. "How do you know about that?" "Oh, I know many things, Alexander. For instance, I know that Sterling Enterprises is hemorrhaging money after that ill-advised Heritage Bakeries acquisition. I know your board is starting to question your leadership. And I know," she paused, savoring the moment, "that your wife has been meeting secretly with your biggest competitor's CEO. Though I doubt business is their primary concern." Victoria's perfectly made-up face contorted with rage. "You little..." "Careful, darling," Isabella cut her off. "We wouldn't want to cause a scene. Not when there's so much at stake." She turned to Richard Sterling. "Shall we discuss this somewhere more private? Or would you prefer I share the details of your company's financial situation with your guests? In Richard's private office, away from prying eyes and ears, Isabella laid out her cards. The Heritage Bakery's acquisition had been a trap, one the Sterlings had walked right into. Through a complex web of shell companies and strategic investments, Isabella now controlled enough of their supply chain to bring their entire operation to its knees. "What do you want?" Richard demanded, his facade of control cracking. "Everything," Isabella replied simply. "Sterling Enterprises will merge with Dulce Revolution. You'll retain a board position, ceremonial, of course. Alexander will step down as heir apparent, and I will assume control as CEO." "You're insane," Alexander spat. "The board will never accept this." Isabella's laugh was soft but sharp. "The board already has. While we've been talking, they've been reviewing the proposal I sent this morning. Your recent failures, combined with Dulce Revolution's international success, make this an easy decision for them." She stood, smoothing her dress. "You have until midnight to accept. After that, I release everything: the financial mismanagement, the failed acquisitions, Victoria's indiscretions, and most importantly, proof of your systematic destruction of small businesses like my family's bakery." Back in the ballroom, Isabella moved through the crowd with the grace of a jungle cat. She could feel the whispers following her, see the shifting allegiances in people's eyes. The same society that had once mocked her was now witnessing her rise, and the irony was delicious. Her phone buzzed, a message from her mother. "Papa's awake. He asked about you." Isabella's heart clenched. Her father had been in and out of consciousness since a second heart attack 2 months ago. Each victory in her campaign against the Sterlings had been for him, for the dream they had crushed. "Isabella." Alexander's voice stopped her near the terrace doors. "Can we talk? Please?" Against her better judgment, she followed him outside. The night air carried the same autumn chill as it had 3 years ago. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. We could start over." Isabella stared at him, incredulous. "Start over? You think after everything you did, you can just—" "I loved you," he interrupted. "I still—" "No," Isabella cut him off, her voice ice. "You loved the idea of me. The sweet, naive girl you could toy with and discard. That girl died the night you stood by and watched your wife destroy her dreams." "I was weak," Alexander admitted. "My father would have accepted me if you had fought for me. But you didn't. You chose your world of privilege and power over love. And now—" She smiled, cold and beautiful as winter. "Now I'm going to take that world from you." Her phone buzzed again, a message from the board. The vote was in. Sterling Enterprises would merge with Dulce Revolution under her leadership. "It's done," she told Alexander, watching his face crumple. "You should go comfort your wife. Though I doubt she'll stay much longer, now that you're no longer the heir to an empire." As she walked away, Isabella felt no triumph, no joy, only a calm certainty that justice was finally being served. The path ahead would be challenging. Merging 2 companies while maintaining the trust of the board and clients would require all her skills. But as she looked around the ballroom, at the faces that had once looked down on her with contempt now turned up in admiration and fear, Isabella knew this was just the beginning. The real work, transforming Sterling Enterprises from a symbol of old money corruption into something meaningful, lay ahead. Her phone lit up with another message from the hospital. Her father was asking for her. Isabella gathered her clutch and headed for the exit, pausing only once to look back at the shattered remains of the Sterling family's reign. Miss Martinez, a young waitress, stopped her, eyes shining with admiration. I've been following your story. You're an inspiration to all of us who dream of making it." Isabella touched the girl's hand gently. "Remember this: they will try to tell you what you can and cannot do. They will mock your dreams and belittle your ambitions. But their mockery is just proof that they fear what you might become." As her driver held the car door open, Isabella caught sight of her reflection in the window. The jade pendant gleamed against her skin, a reminder of every struggle, every sacrifice, every small victory that had led to this moment. Tomorrow, the business world would wake to news of the merger. Tomorrow, she would begin the work of reshaping both companies into her vision. Tomorrow, the real challenge would begin. But tonight, she was going to sit by her father's hospital bed, hold his hand, and tell him that his little girl had done it. She had turned their family's legacy of hard work and determination into an empire. And she was just getting started. The morning headline screamed across every major business publication: Dulce Revolution acquires Sterling Enterprises, the sweet taste of change. Isabella Martinez sat in her new corner office at the Sterling Tower, now the headquarters of the merged companies, reading the Wall Street Journal's coverage of her meteoric rise. But victory tasted bitter today. Her father, Miguel Martinez, had taken a turn for the worse during the night. The doctors were concerned about his declining condition, and for all her newly acquired power, Isabella felt helpless against the real enemy, time. "Miss Martinez," Sarah interrupted her thoughts, "the transition team is ready for you in the main conference room. And Mrs. Sterling is here. She's demanding to see you." Isabella straightened her Chanel blazer, a armor of cream and gold that made her look both powerful and approachable. "Send Victoria in first. Let's get this unpleasantness out of the way." Victoria Sterling burst into the office like a hurricane in designer clothes, her perfect makeup unable to hide the rage and fear in her eyes. "You vindictive little witch. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've done exactly what your husband's family has done for generations," Isabella replied calmly, not bothering to rise from her chair. "I've acquired what I wanted through strategic business moves. The only difference is, I didn't inherit my power, I earned it." "Alexander is devastated," Victoria spat. "Our reputation." "Your reputation?" Isabella's laugh was sharp. "You mean the reputation you're so desperate to protect that you've been sleeping with James Montgomery from rival Maven Industries? Tell me, Victoria, does Alexander know about the private villa in the Hamptons?" Victoria's face went white. "How did you?" "I know everything," Isabella cut her off. "Every secret meeting, every stolen moment, every transaction you thought was hidden. But don't worry, your secret is safe, as long as you sign these." She slid a folder across the desk. "What is this?" "Your resignation from all Sterling charitable boards and social committees, effective immediately. You'll maintain your social standing, I'm not as cruel as you were, but you'll step away from any position of influence in this company's affairs." Victoria's hands trembled as she picked up the papers. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "No, Victoria. I don't enjoy causing pain. That was always your specialty." Isabella's voice softened slightly. "Sign the papers, take the settlement we're offering, and start over. Maybe without the pressure of maintaining appearances, you and Alexander can rebuild what you've lost." After Victoria left, Isabella allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. She touched the jade pendant, thinking of her father lying in his hospital bed. All of this, the power, the victory, the revenge, seemed hollow without him there to see it. "Miss Martinez?" Sarah appeared again. "The transition team is still waiting, and there's something else. A Mr. James Montgomery from Maven Industries is requesting an urgent meeting." Isabella smiled. Everything was falling into place. "Schedule Montgomery for tomorrow. Right now, we have a company to reshape." The transition meeting lasted hours. Isabella laid out her vision for the merged companies: a complete overhaul of Sterling's predatory business practices, a new emphasis on supporting small businesses rather than crushing them, and an innovative approach to combining luxury with accessibility. "Some of you," she addressed the room of executives, most of whom had looked down on her 3 years ago, "will find these changes difficult to accept. Those who cannot adapt should tender their resignations by the end of the week. Those who stay will be part of something revolutionary." As the day wore on, Isabella received another call from the hospital. Her father had stabilized but remained critical. She wanted to rush to his side, but there was too much at stake. The first days after a merger were crucial. Late that evening, as she finally prepared to leave for the hospital, Alexander appeared in her doorway. He looked disheveled, his usual polish replaced by desperate exhaustion. "You never gave me a chance to explain," he said softly. Isabella didn't look up from her computer. "Explain what, Alexander?" How you let your father and your fiancé humiliate me? How you watched them destroy my family's dream? Or perhaps you'd like to explain Victoria's affair? He flinched at the last part. So you know about that too. I know everything. That's how I won. She finally met his gaze. Why are you here? Because I made a mistake 3 years ago. He moved closer to her desk. Because seeing you again, seeing what you've become. Isabella, I never stopped loving you. For a moment, just a moment, Isabella felt her heart flutter treacherously. Then she remembered that night, remembered his silence as Victoria tore her dreams to shreds. Love, she stood slowly. No, Alexander. What you're feeling isn't love. It's fear mixed with attraction. You're drawn to power, just like your father. And now that I have the power you lost, you think you want me back. That's not true, he protested. I was a coward then, but I've changed. We've both changed, Isabella agreed. I'm no longer the girl who needed your approval or your father's acceptance. And you're no longer the man I thought could save me. The truth is, I saved myself. Her phone buzzed, another hospital update. This time, her heart stopped. Her father was asking for her, and the doctor's tone was urgent. I have to go, she gathered her things quickly. If you want to do something useful, Alexander, start working on the community outreach program I outlined. Show me you can be more than your father's son. At the hospital, Isabella kicked off her designer heels and curled up in the chair beside her father's bed, just as she had done countless nights before. Miguel Martinez opened his eyes slowly, finding his daughter's face in the dim light. Mi pequeña guerrera, he whispered, using her childhood nickname. You did it. I did it for you, Papa, she held his hand gently. For our family, for our dream. No, mi amor, he squeezed her hand weakly. You did it for yourself. And that's what makes me most proud. Promise me something. Anything, Papa. Don't let the bitterness consume you. You won. Now learn to live again. Isabella felt tears slip down her cheeks. I don't know how, Papa. I've been fighting for so long. Then it's time to stop fighting and start building. Your mother and I didn't teach you to bake so you could destroy others. We taught you to create, to bring joy, to make the world a little sweeter. As she sat there, holding her father's hand, Isabella felt something shift inside her. The triumph of revenge had given her power, but it hadn't given her peace. Maybe it was time to channel that power into something more meaningful than destruction. Her phone lit up with messages, urgent business decisions waiting for her attention, Alexander's tentative ideas for community outreach, and a reminder about tomorrow's meeting with James Montgomery. The empire she had built awaited her command. But for now, she was just a daughter sitting with her father, remembering the simple joy of baking in their tiny kitchen, dreaming of making the world a little sweeter, one recipe at a time. Dawn broke over Manhattan as Isabella stood in the executive kitchen of Sterling Tower, now transformed into a state-of-the-art test kitchen. Her blazer was draped over a chair, sleeves rolled up, hands covered in flour. For the first time in years, she was baking. Her father's words from the previous night echoed in her mind as she kneaded the dough with practiced movements. The familiar motions brought back memories of simpler times, when success meant a perfectly risen loaf rather than a corporate takeover. Miss Martinez? Sarah appeared in the doorway, surprised to find her boss in such an informal state. Mr. Montgomery is here for the meeting. Should I reschedule? Isabella looked down at her flour-covered hands and smiled. No. Bring him here. James Montgomery, CEO of Maven Industries and Victoria's secret lover, stepped into the kitchen looking distinctly uncomfortable. His $1,000 suit seemed out of place among the mixing bowls and baking sheets. This is unexpected, he said, watching Isabella shape the dough into perfect rolls. Life often is, she replied, not looking up. Like finding out your secret affair with Victoria Sterling was documented in detail by private investigators. That must have been unexpected. The color drained from his face. I don't know what you're talking about. James, Isabella finally met his gaze. Let's not waste time with denials. I know about the villa, the offshore accounts, and most importantly, your plans to use Victoria to gain inside information about Sterling Enterprises. She placed the rolls in the oven with careful precision before continuing. "But that's not why I called you here. I have a proposition that might interest you more than an affair with a desperate socialite." Over the next hour, as the scent of fresh bread filled the kitchen, Isabella laid out her vision. A partnership between their companies could revolutionize the industry, combining Maven's distribution network with Dulce Revolution's innovation and Sterling's resources. "Why are you telling me this?" Montgomery asked, genuinely puzzled. "You could destroy me with what you know." "Because destruction isn't the goal anymore," Isabella replied, removing the golden brown rolls from the oven. "Building something meaningful is." She offered him one of the warm rolls. Sometimes the best deals are made over breaking bread, not breaking people. After Montgomery left, visibly relieved and cautiously optimistic about their potential partnership, Isabella felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Her father had been right, creation was more satisfying than destruction. Her phone buzzed with a hospital update. Her father was showing signs of improvement. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about his recovery. "Sarah," she called out, "arrange a board meeting for this afternoon. And send someone to collect Alexander Sterling. It's time to rebuild what we've broken." The board meeting was unlike any Sterling Enterprises had ever seen. Isabella stood before them not as a conquering victor, but as a visionary leader. Her presentation outlined a complete transformation of the company's culture and mission. "For too long, success in this industry has been measured by how many smaller businesses we could crush," she began, her voice strong and clear. "Today, that changes. We're launching the Sweet Dreams Initiative." The irony of naming her new program after her family's lost bakery wasn't lost on anyone in the room. But as Isabella explained the details, a program to support and mentor small bakery owners, providing resources and distribution networks instead of predatory competition, she saw something change in the board members' eyes. Hope replaced skepticism. Alexander, sitting quietly in the corner, looked at her with a mixture of admiration and regret. When she finished her presentation, he was the first to speak. "I want to lead this initiative," he said, standing. "If you'll let me." Isabella studied him carefully. The proud heir who had once watched her humiliation was gone, replaced by someone who seemed genuinely eager to make amends. "It won't be easy," she warned. "You'll be working directly with the people your family's company hurt. You'll have to earn their trust." "I know," he nodded. "That's why it has to be me." Later that evening, Isabella visited her father again. He was sitting up in bed, color returning to his cheeks, as Maria fed him one of the rolls she had baked that morning. "You're using Abuela's recipe," he noted with a smile. "With a few modifications," Isabella admitted. "Just like I'm modifying the company." "Papa, I think I finally understand what you and Mama were trying to teach me all those years in the bakery." "Oh? And what's that, mi amor?" "That the secret ingredient isn't revenge or power, it's love. Love for what you do, love for the people you serve, love for the legacy you create." Her father's eyes filled with tears of pride. "Now you're truly ready to lead, mi pequeña guerrera." As if on cue, her phone buzzed with a message from Victoria Sterling. Isabella excused herself to take the call in the hallway. "I signed the papers," Victoria said without preamble. "But I need to tell you something. About Alexander." Isabella's heart tightened. "I'm listening." "The night of the gala, 3 years ago, he tried to stop me. After you left, he confronted his father, defended you. That's why Richard sent him abroad for 6 months, to learn his place. I married him while he was still broken." The revelation hit Isabella like a physical blow. All these years, she had painted Alexander as a willing participant in her humiliation, never considering that he might have fought for her in his own way. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked softly. "Because you won," Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "And because maybe it's time we all stopped pretending to be people we're not." After the call, Isabella stood at her father's hospital window, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled over Manhattan. The empire she had built through revenge was transforming into something else, something better. Her phone lit up again, this time with photos from the first Sweet Dreams Initiative meeting. Alexander was there, sleeves rolled up, learning to bake from one of the small business owners they were supporting. His smile was genuine, his humility apparent. "Everything okay?" her mother asked, joining her at the window. "I think it will be," Isabella replied, touching her jade pendant. "We're all learning to rise again, in our own way." As night fell over the city, Isabella Martinez, the girl they had once mocked, the woman who had conquered them, and now the leader who would unite them, began planning tomorrow's recipes. Both for the bread she would bake, and for the future she would build. The sweet smell of redemption, it turned out, was even more satisfying than the bitter taste of revenge. 1 month after the launch of the Sweet Dreams initiative, Isabella sat in her office reviewing the program's initial results. Spread across her desk were success stories, small bakeries flourishing under the mentorship program, families reclaiming their dreams, communities being rebuilt. But one file in particular caught her attention: Sterling's Old Town Bakery. Alexander had chosen to begin his redemption by helping the very first bakery his father had destroyed 15 years ago. The elderly couple who had owned it were long gone, but their daughter remained, carrying their dream like a buried seed waiting for spring. "Miss Martinez?" Sarah appeared at her door. "Mr. Sterling is here with his monthly report, and there's something else. Someone from your past." Isabella looked up to see Alexander entering, followed by a face she hadn't seen in 3 years, Thomas Reynolds, her first investor who had abandoned her after the Hamilton Country Club incident. "Isabella," Thomas stepped forward, his confident demeanor notably diminished. "I believe I owe you an apology." She gestured for them both to sit, memories flooding back of the day Thomas had withdrawn his investment, citing concerns about associating with failures. His rejection had been another nail in Sweet Dreams' coffin. "I've been following your success," Thomas continued. "What you've built, it's extraordinary. I should have believed in you." "Yes," Isabella replied coolly, "you should have. But that's not why you're here, is it?" Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "No. I'm here because my own company is struggling. The market is changing, and I was hoping." "You were hoping to capitalize on my success now that I'm powerful enough to be worth your time?" Isabella finished for him. She turned to Alexander. "What do you think, Mr. Sterling? Should we help the man who once called me a failure?" Alexander met her gaze steadily. "I think," he said carefully, "that if we believe in second chances, we have to extend them to everyone, not just those we want to forgive." Isabella studied him for a moment, noting how different he looked from the privileged heir she'd known. Working with the bakeries had changed him. There was flour under his perfectly manicured nails, and genuine humility in his eyes. "Tell me about Sterling's Old Town Bakery," she requested, changing the subject. "How is Margaret doing?" Alexander's face lit up. "She's amazing, Isabella. The recipes her parents left behind, with our support and distribution network, she's already opened 2 new locations. But more than that, she's helping other bakery owners adapt their family recipes for larger scale production while maintaining quality." "And you're learning from her?" "Every day," he admitted. "Did you know her father used to get up at 3 a.m. every morning to start the first batch of sourdough? I've been doing the same, learning his techniques. It's humbling." Isabella turned back to Thomas. "You see, Mr. Reynolds, that's the difference between then and now. True success isn't about crushing competition or maximizing profits. It's about building something meaningful, something that lifts others up instead of pushing them down." She pulled out a contract from her desk. "I'm prepared to help you, but with conditions. Your company will become part of our mentorship program, not as a mentor, but as a mentee. You'll learn from the very people you once dismissed as beneath you." Thomas's face reddened, but he reached for the contract. Before he could take it, Isabella pulled it back slightly. "One more thing," she added. "You'll work directly with Alexander and Margaret at Sterling's Old Town Bakery. 3 a.m. shifts included." After Thomas left, clutching the signed contract like a lifeline, Alexander lingered. "That was kind of you," he observed. "Was it?" Isabella smiled slightly. "Or was it just good business wrapped in a lesson about humility?" "Maybe both," he acknowledged. "Like someone once taught me." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the years of pain and betrayal seemed to fade. Alexander had proven himself over the past month, working tirelessly to make amends not just to her, but to every family his father's company had hurt. "Isabella," he started, then hesitated. "I've been wanting to ask, would you have dinner with me? Not as business partners or former enemies, just as people who might have a second chance?" Before she could respond, Sarah rushed in. "Miss Martinez. Your father, he's being released from the hospital." The news sent a wave of joy through Isabella. Her father's recovery had been slow but steady, and now, finally, he was coming home. "I'm sorry, Alexander, I have to go," he smiled warmly. "Family first. Always." At the hospital, as Isabella helped her father into the wheelchair, he noticed something different about his daughter. "You're glowing, mi amor," he observed. "And it's not just from success." "Papa," she chided gently, but he wasn't finished. "I see the way you look at the sterling boy now. Not with hate anymore, but with possibility." "He's changed," Isabella admitted as they left the hospital. "We all have." Later that evening, after settling her father into the penthouse apartment she'd bought for her parents, Isabella returned to Sterling Tower. The test kitchen lights were still on, and she found Alexander there, covered in flour, practicing Margaret's sourdough technique. "You're doing it wrong," she said softly, making him jump. "Here, let me show you." Standing beside him, guiding his hands through the familiar motions of kneading dough, Isabella felt the last walls around her heart beginning to crumble. This wasn't the same man who had let her dreams be destroyed. This was someone new, someone who had faced his own failures and chosen to rise from them with grace. "About dinner," she said, not looking up from their joined hands in the dough. "Yes." His smile lit up the kitchen brighter than any fluorescent light. "Tomorrow?" "Next week," she countered. "First, you need to master this sourdough. A sterling working in my company can't serve mediocre bread." They worked in comfortable silence, the rhythmic motion of kneading dough a meditation on second chances and new beginnings. Outside, Manhattan glittered like 1,000 stars brought down to earth, but the real magic was happening in a kitchen where two former enemies were learning to create something new together. "You know," Alexander said as they shaped the loaves, "they still talk about that night at the Hamilton Country Club. But now they tell a different story." "Oh?" "Now they talk about the girl they mocked becoming the woman who taught them all about grace." Isabella touched her jade pendant, thinking of how far they'd all come. "Grace," she mused, "and good bread. Sometimes that's all you need to change the world." As they waited for the bread to rise, Isabella realized that her father had been right all along. The secret ingredient wasn't revenge or even love, it was the courage to believe in second chances, even when they seemed impossible. And sometimes, those second chances came with the sweet smell of sourdough and the promise of tomorrow. The night of Isabella and Alexander's dinner arrived with an unexpected complication. Victoria Sterling had called a press conference, and rumors swirled about what revelations she might share. The business world waited with bated breath, wondering if she would expose secrets that could shake the merged empire Isabella had built. "We should postpone," Alexander said, calling Isabella in her office. "If Victoria—" "No," Isabella interrupted firmly. "We've let fear of what others might do control our lives for too long. Victoria will do what she does, but we're not canceling our plans." She had chosen a small, family-owned Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, far from the glittering establishments where Manhattan's elite dined. As she walked in, wearing a simple emerald dress that matched her jade pendant, she found Alexander already waiting, looking slightly out of place in his expensive suit among the checkered tablecloths and candlelit intimacy. "You look—" He trailed off, taking in her appearance. "Different," she suggested, sitting down. "Real," he finished. "Like the Isabella the first fell in love with." Before she could respond, their phones simultaneously lit up with breaking news alerts. Victoria's press conference was starting. They shared a look, then deliberately turned their phones face down. "Tell me about the bakery," Isabella said instead, picking up the menu. "How was Margaret's new chocolate sourdough received?" As Alexander described the latest developments at Sterling's Old Town Bakery, his face animated with genuine enthusiasm, Isabella found herself studying him. The entitled air was gone, replaced by someone who spoke passionately about fermentation times and the importance of organic ingredients. "You really love it, don't you?" she observed. The actual work, not just the business side. I do, he admitted. It's honest work. When you create something with your own hands, there's no hiding behind family names or trust funds. The bread either rises or it doesn't. Their conversation flowed naturally, touching on everything from business plans to childhood memories. Alexander told her about the pressure of growing up as a sterling heir, while Isabella shared stories about learning to bake at her grandmother's knee. I never told you, Alexander said softly as their dessert arrived, but that night at the Hamilton Country Club, after you left, I went to your bakery. Isabella's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. What? I wanted to apologize, to explain. But when I got there, I saw your father closing up for the last time. He was crying, Isabella. This proud man who had built something beautiful from nothing was crying as he locked the door. That's when I really understood what my family had done, not just to you, but to so many others. Isabella felt tears pricking at her eyes. Why didn't you ever tell me this? Because apologizing wasn't enough. I needed to change, to become someone worthy of forgiveness. Their phones buzzed again insistently. This time, they couldn't ignore them. Victoria's press conference was making headlines, but not for the reasons they'd feared. She's supporting the Sweet Dreams initiative, Isabella read in disbelief. She's announcing a personal foundation to help children of immigrant entrepreneurs access business education. Alexander read from his own phone. And she's publicly apologizing to you, Isabella. She's admitting everything, the sabotage, the affair, all of it. They stared at each other across the table, the weight of the moment settling around them like a warm blanket. People can change, Alexander said quietly. If we let them. After dinner, they walked through Brooklyn's quiet streets, their steps falling into natural synchronization. They passed a small bakery, closed for the night but with lights still on inside, one of the businesses participating in their mentorship program. Want to check on them? Isabella suggested impulsively. I have keys to all our partner locations. Inside, they found the owner, an elderly Greek man named Stavros, teaching his granddaughter the secret to his famous baklava. He looked up in surprise at their entrance but broke into a warm smile. Ah! The angels of second chances, he declared, embracing them both. Come, come. You must taste my Sophia's first solo attempt at baklava. For the next hour, they sat in the warm kitchen, sampling Sophia's creations and listening to Stavros' stories of his own immigrant journey. Isabella watched Alexander interact with them, noting how naturally he fit into this world of flour-dusted aprons and shared recipes. You know, Stavros said as they prepared to leave, when the sterling name first appeared on my door, I thought it was the end. But you too, you've shown us that even the mightiest can learn humility, and the hurt can learn forgiveness. Outside, snow had begun to fall softly, transforming Brooklyn's streets into something magical. Alexander took Isabella's hand as they walked, and she didn't pull away. I have something to show you, he said, leading her toward the old Sweet Dreams bakery location. I've been waiting for the right moment. The storefront was dark, but as Alexander unlocked the door, lights flickered on to reveal a completely renovated space. The old ovens had been replaced with state-of-the-art equipment, but the original sign had been lovingly restored and hung on the wall like a piece of art. What is this? Isabella whispered, taking in the familiar yet transformed space. The next phase of the Sweet Dreams initiative, Alexander explained. A training center for aspiring bakers, run by your mother, using your family's recipes. If you want it. Isabella walked through the space, touching the counters, remembering all the mornings she'd spent here watching her father work. But instead of pain, the memories now filled her with hope. Why, she asked, turning to face Alexander. Because some dreams deserve a second chance, he said simply. Just like some loves do. Before she could respond, her phone rang. Her father was calling from the penthouse. Papa? Is everything okay? Better than okay, mi amor. Miguel Martinez's voice was thick with emotion. I just saw Victoria's press conference, and then Sophia sent me pictures from her bakery. Isabella, my daughter, you've done something remarkable. You've turned pain into possibility. We all have, Papa, she replied, watching Alexander as he studied the old family photos they'd hung on the walls. Sometimes the best revenge is showing others a better way. After ending the call, Isabella found Alexander in front of a particular photo, one taken on the day Sweet Dreams had first opened, showing a young Isabella helping her father knead dough. "I was so angry for so long," she said softly. "But anger makes the bread bitter." Alexander turned to her, his eyes full of everything they'd lost and everything they might still find. "And love? Love makes it rise," she finished, stepping closer to him. As they stood in the place where her dreams had once died and were now being reborn, Isabella realized that the true measure of success wasn't in conquering others, but in helping them rise alongside you. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a blanket of new possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, mergers to manage, programs to expand, hearts to heal. But tonight, in a renovated bakery in Brooklyn, two people who had once been enemies discovered that the sweetest revenge of all was learning to love again. 1 year had passed since the night in the renovated Sweet Dreams Bakery. The Hamilton Country Club was once again hosting its annual charity gala, but this time, everything was different. The event was now jointly sponsored by the Dulce Revolution Sterling Enterprises merged company and Victoria's new foundation for immigrant entrepreneurs. Isabella stood before the mirror in her office at Sterling Tower, adjusting her jade pendant. Her gown, a masterpiece in deep purple, was worlds away from the homemade dress she'd worn that fateful night 4 years ago. But the biggest difference wasn't in her appearance, it was in her heart. "Ready?" Alexander appeared in the doorway, handsome in his tuxedo. Their relationship had blossomed over the past year, built on a foundation of shared values and redemption rather than the innocent passion of their youth. Almost, she smiled, reviewing the speech she would give tonight. The Sweet Dreams initiative had transformed hundreds of lives, creating a network of thriving small businesses across the country. Tonight's gala would announce its expansion internationally. "Your father's already there," Alexander informed her. He insisted on personally overseeing the dessert presentation. Miguel Martinez had made a full recovery and now served as the head of their artisanal training program. His journey from nearly losing everything to helping others achieve their dreams had become a symbol of their company's transformation. As they drove to the Hamilton Country Club, Isabella reflected on how much had changed. Victoria, surprisingly, had become one of their strongest allies. After her public confession and apology, she had thrown herself into charitable work, finding purpose in helping others instead of tearing them down. "Nervous?" Alexander asked as they pulled up to the club. "No," Isabella squeezed his hand. "For the first time in this place, I'm exactly where I belong." The ballroom was packed with familiar faces, but the atmosphere was fundamentally different. Instead of the usual parade of wealth and privilege, the event showcased success stories from their initiative. Small business owners mingled with corporate executives, sharing stories and breaking bread, quite literally, as tables featured artisanal breads from their partner bakeries. "Isabella." Victoria approached, looking elegant but softer somehow. "You need to see this." She led them to a display where Thomas Reynolds, the investor who had once abandoned Isabella, was earnestly discussing business plans with a young immigrant entrepreneur. His 3 months of early morning shifts at Sterling's Old Town Bakery had transformed him from a ruthless businessman into a dedicated mentor. "Miss Martinez," Sarah appeared with an urgent message. "They're ready for the announcement." Isabella took her place at the podium, surveying the room that had once witnessed her humiliation. Her parents sat in the front row, pride shining in their eyes. Alexander stood nearby, his presence a steady support. Even Richard Sterling was there, changed by his year of working directly with the families his company had once destroyed. "For years ago, I stood in this room with a dream and a homemade dress," Isabella began. "I was mocked, humiliated, and dismissed. Many of you were there that night. Some of you participated in my humiliation. Others stood by in silence." The room was completely still, every face turned toward her. "I could have let that night destroy me. Instead, it forged me. I built an empire, not just to prove you wrong, but to prove something to myself. But somewhere along the way, I learned that true success isn't about revenge or power, it's about transformation." She gestured to the diverse crowd before her. "Look around this room. Former competitors now collaborate. Those who once looked down on others now learn from them. We've created something revolutionary, not just in business, but in human connection. Isabella paused, touching her jade pendant. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that the Sweet Dreams initiative is going global. But more than that, I'm proud to announce my engagement to Alexander Sterling. A murmur of surprise and delight rippled through the crowd. Alexander joined her at the podium, taking her hand. Our story, he added, is proof that second chances aren't just business strategy, they're life's greatest gift. Together, we're building something my family's old empire never could, a legacy of hope. As applause filled the room, Isabella saw tears in Victoria's eyes. The woman who had once been her greatest enemy mouthed a silent thank you. Later that evening, as music played and couples danced, Isabella found herself in a quiet moment with her father near the dessert display. Look at this, mi amor, Miguel gestured to the array of pastries and breads. Every piece here represents a dream renewed, a family restored. Just like ours, Papa. No, mi pequeña guerrera, he corrected gently. Better than ours. You didn't just restore our dream, you made it bigger than we ever imagined. Alexander joined them, flowers somehow already on his tuxedo sleeve. Sorry, I was just helping Margaret with her new chocolate sourdough display. Isabella laughed, brushing the flower from his sleeve. Once a baker, always a baker. Speaking of which, he said mysteriously, there's something I want to show you both. He led them to a private room where a single cake stood on a pedestal. It was identical to the one Isabella's grandmother used to make for special occasions, a recipe lost when they closed Sweet Dreams Bakery. How did you? Isabella breathed. Your mother helped me perfect it, Alexander admitted. I'd been practicing for months. I wanted our engagement cake to be something meaningful. As they shared the cake, Alexander's first solo recreation of her grandmother's recipe, Isabella felt the last pieces of her journey fall into place. The girl they had mocked hadn't just become the woman who ruled them, she had become the woman who transformed them. The next morning, Isabella and Alexander arrived early at the Sweet Dreams Training Center. Students were already lined up, eager to learn, to create, to dream. Among them were children of privilege working alongside immigrant entrepreneurs, all united by the simple magic of creating something with their own hands. Ready for another day of changing lives? Alexander asked, handing her an apron. Isabella looked around at what they had built together, not an empire of fear and domination, but a community of growth and possibility. You know what the secret ingredient is? She asked, tying her apron. Love? That too. But mainly it's belief. Belief that people can change. Belief that dreams don't die, they just rise in new forms. Belief that sometimes the sweetest revenge is showing others a better way. As they joined their students at the workstations, Isabella caught her reflection in the window. The jade pendant gleamed at her throat, but it was her smile that truly shone, no longer the sharp weapon it had once been, but a genuine expression of joy. The girl they had mocked had indeed become the woman who ruled them all, not through fear or power, but through the simple, transformative acts of forgiveness, love, and freshly baked bread. And that was the sweetest victory of all.